to the autopsy report.
It is probable that Mr. Rell survived a short time after he was shot. However, Mr. Faraday died instantaneously from the stabbing. Interesting. It looks like we now know everything we need to know about this case.
Are you sure we know everything?
Of course! The incident began with Mr. Faraday attempting to get his revenge. The prosecutor went into a rage after being accused and tried to kill the defendant. But the defendant fought back, and they ended up killing each other. The defendant fought back and ended up killing each other. It's all very clear and simple. There's absolutely no margin for doubt.
Do you really believe that to be the truth?
Are you saying that just because I figured out the truth before you, that you don't want to believe it's true? It's alright. It's alright. If you disagree with my argument, then prove me wrong. Well, if there's any contradiction to be found, that is. Don't worry, I will.
Let us begin.
Mr. Faraday's death was instantaneous, while Mr. Rell survived for a short time. From this, it is obvious that Mr. Faraday died after he shot Mr. Rell. And Mr. Rell, while on the brink of death, stole Mr. Faraday's knife and stabbed him. Those are the facts of this case.
Mr. Faraday's death was instantaneous, therefore he must have attacked first. Proving the logic to be false is probably the fastest way to show her that she's wrong. In that case, I should first look for any holes in her theory.
Mr. Faraday's death was instantaneous, while Mr. Rell survived for a short time.
Do you truly believe that Mr. Faraday died instantaneously?
I have the murder report right here. Mr. Faraday died instantaneously of shock due to being stabbed in the chest. There, you see? It's been documented clear as day. From this, it is obvious that Mr. Faraday died after he shot Mr. Rell.
Mr. Faraday shot Mr. Rell before he died? Do you have any basis for this statement?
Your foolishness has no end, does it? Now, I hate to repeat myself. However, Mr. Faraday died instantaneously. That's all the basis I need.
Alright, so if Mr. Faraday died instantaneously, then he must have attacked Mr. Rell before being stabbed.
You're finally beginning to catch on, I see. And Mr. Rell, while on the brink of death, stole Mr. Faraday's knife and stabbed him.
So you believe that the dying Mr. Rell stole the knife from Mr. Faraday?
Mr. Rell became desperate after he did not want to die. Human beings can do amazing things if they are put to the test. So the two men struggled, and in the end, Mr. Rell was able to grab the knife and stab Mr. Faraday. The messy conditions of this room is a testament of their struggle. Yes, my logic is perfectly sound.
Can you really say that? It's perfect.
What are you insinuating?
Nothing! However, I can't let you say what you said slide by without further inquiry. One must be clear and precise. So if you could append that statement to your testimony.
Fine. They struggled, and Mr. Rell used the last of his strength to counterattack Mr. Faraday.
About this statement.
Mr. Rell used all of his remaining strength to take the knife and defend himself. One can easily see that they had a violent struggle. Of course, it's nothing compared to what my riding crop can do.
How does one compare the damage her crop can do to the state of this room?
Furthermore, all the plastic bags on the floor of this room were scattered there due to the fighting. Is there anything else that I can explain for you?
No, that'll be fine.
Those are the facts of this case.
Claiming speculation as fact already, don't you feel that the evidence is a bit lacking?
You'll find all the evidence you need just by looking around this room. Mr. Faraday collapsed on top of Mr. Rell. In addition, Mr. Faraday died instantaneously, making the counterattack impossible. Furthermore, the room is a total mess from their fight. I dare say that there's more evidence here than you can whip a whip at.
Looks like she's becoming more and more confident. And looking at this place, she might have a right to be. After all, everything here seems to support her theory.
It looks like you're starting to see my point. I'm as good as won a little competition.
There's something strange about Franziska's theory. I should compare her claim to the data I've gathered thus far. I just know there's a contradiction somewhere. Okay, so Mr. Faraday died instantly from the stab wound. Mr. Rel was shot first. In response, stabbed Faraday. A struggle, Mr. Rel used last of his strength to counterattack Mr. Faraday. Let's go look at what we have. Gumshoe. He heard a gunshot, but didn't hear a struggle. If the two men were fighting, the struggle would have surely caused a bit of noise. However, Detective Gumshoe testified that he heard absolutely nothing.
You place too much faith in that detective's testimony, you know. But for the sake of argument, let's say there wasn't a fight. How then did Mr. Rel get his hands on the knife?
Mr. Faraday's bag was sitting right there in lobby number 2. Is it not hard to imagine that perhaps Mr. Rel saw the chance and took it out at some point?
So, what you're saying is this. Mr. Rel took the chance when he saw the opportunity and took the knife from the bag. And then Mr. Faraday shot Mr. Rel after being stabbed.
There's something strange in this assistant. Yes, that's wrong. Wait, something doesn't add up.
Oh, really?
It's simply not possible for Mr. Faraday to have shot Mr. Rel after being stabbed. After all, wasn't it an instantaneous death, I believe you said? According to the coroner's report, Mr. Faraday died instantaneously, meaning that he died immediately upon being stabbed by the knife. Ergo, he could not possibly have fired the gun after that.
Oh, you got me.
But of course.
Well, then, if the report is correct, then there's only one correct explanation. If we suppose that Mr. Rel attacked first, then Mr. Faraday, who died instantaneously, would have been able to kill Mr. Rel. Therefore, Mr. Rel must have stabbed Mr. Faraday after he was shot, and they both died. That is the only explanation that makes logical sense.
Negating your opponent's ideas in order to prove your own theory. I see you've been studying, Franziska.
I just wanted to explain it to you as simply as possible, before you foolishly proposed the foolish theory that only a foolish fool like you could.
How naive of you to believe that only your opinions are valid, and still expect to discover the truth that the crime scene offers you. Franziska, you've still got a ways to go.
What are you talking about? What are you saying there's a flaw in my logic?
Faraday died instantaneously. And the fact that he did is what gave rise to the contradiction of this scene. The contradiction here in the crime scene is... Let's look that over one more time. From Faraday, Mac Rel got into a struggle here. Faraday died instantly from the stab wound. Explain again why they fell this way. Let me get this straight. What you're arguing is this. Mr. Faraday took the gun from his evidence bag and shot Mr. Rel. Then, the wounded Mr. Rel found an opportunity to take the knife and strike back. Upon being stabbed, Mr. Faraday died on the spot, and Mr. Rel died thereafter. Is that the case, then how do you explain this? Take a good look at the order in which their bodies are piled.
No!
Mr. Faraday's body is lying on top of Mr. Rel's. Therefore, Mr. Rel must have died before Mr. Faraday.
Impossible!
Yes, I agree that this seems strange no matter what angle you approach it from. Which means that the real mystery behind this crime scene that let's solve it.
No! No, not so fast!
Miles Edgeworth. What now?
I simply think that you ought to think a bit more outside the box. And that is even clearer now that the incident started with Mr. Faraday's murderous intent.
She sure bounced back quickly. An explanation won't be enough this time. It's going to take some decisive evidence to prove her wrong. Let's get started then.
It was just chance that Mr. Faraday's body fell on top of Mr. Rell's. The two bodies fell into a pile, which indicates that they attacked each other at the same time. It really doesn't matter in the slightest that they fell in the opposite order.
I just know that Franziska's explanation isn't absolutely correct. All I have to do is find a hole in her logic. Once I do, I can then present her with the evidence that proves her contradiction.
It was just chance that Mr. Faraday's body fell on top of Mr. Rell's.
About the...
Pressing someone's testimony in order to gain some time to think. You're a real one-trick pony, aren't you? It's too bad your trick won't work. Only works on fools.
That was not my intent! I simply wish for more details as to how Mr. Faraday ended up on top of Mr. Rell.
Someone's impatient. I was just about to explain everything to you. So do you think you could hold on for a minute?
Franziska, I'll make you a deal. I'll hold on if you hold on to that wisp of yours.
Oh, I'll hold on to it alright, as I whip you. Well, now that you've quieted down a bit, I'd like to continue, if you don't mind. The two bodies fell onto a pile.
The two fell on top of each other. Don't you find that just to be a bit strange?
Not at all.
I can see it in her eyes. She's dead set against me from the bottom of her heart.
Miles Edgeworth, once I'm done here, you'll see that there's nothing strange at all. Now then, the two men fell into a pile, which indicates that they attacked each other at the same time.
What do you mean by they attacked each other at the same time?
I assume Mr. Faraday had the two different weapons in his hands. He made to attack Mr. Rell while holding both the knife and revolver, and then, after Mr. Faraday fired the gun, Mr. Rell grabbed the knife as he was falling and stabbed Mr. Faraday. This is how Mr. Rell wound up on the bottom of Mr. Faraday, with Mr. Faraday on top. At close range, there is more than possible.
Yes, it is possible, but...
Well, if you have any other ideas, then show me what you've got!
Oh, I will! And to that extent, I'd like you to append what you just said to your testimony.
I don't see any point to that, but as you please. That fact indicates that they attacked each other at the same time from close range.
Close range? You're saying that they attacked each other at the same time from close range?
Exactly. Mr. Faraday pointed the gun at Mr. Rell's chest and pulled the trigger. Mr. Rell then took the knife from Mr. Faraday and stabbed him before he fell unconscious. The dead Mr. Faraday instantly fell on top of Mr. Rell from the stabbing, pinning Mr. Rell under him, where he died shortly thereafter. And that is how they ended up on top of each other, with no contradictions to be seen. It really doesn't matter in the slightest that they fell in the opposite order.
Hold on, it does. Do you really believe that they fell in the exact opposite order in which they attacked?
Miles Edgeworth, you're not listening to a word that I'm saying. They both attacked each other at the same time, and Mr. Rell fell first by chance, leaving Mr. Faraday to just happen to fall on top of him. Then Mr. Rell died shortly thereafter, pinned underneath Mr. Faraday. That's how it happened.
So the two men attacked each other, with Mr. Rell randomly falling down first? The fact that the order they attacked each other in varies from the order they fell in doesn't cause a problem for me. However, there's definitely one certain aspect that I'm having trouble swallowing. They attacked each other at close range. I just want to find the evidence that proves this. In his hand, the bullet that killed Rell was fired from a few yards away! So you believe they killed each other at close range? Sorry, but that's impossible. Just as is written in the crime scene notes. The firing of the handgun did not leave gunpowder burn on Mr. Rel's clothes. Therefore, Mr. Rel and the gun must have been separated by the distance of at least 2 or 3 yards. Ah! Yes, this is by far the biggest contradiction. The 2 bodies are piled up on top of each other, yet the gun was fired from a distance. And with there being no chance that Mr. L moved that far after being shot, that leaves only one possible explanation.
What completely foolish line, foolishly thought, a thoroughly foolish fool! But if I'm not right, then who was it that made the first move with the intent to kill, huh? Who?
The person that attacked first with the murderous intent? Well, that would be... neither. Here in this room, contradictions appear no matter which man we claim attacked first. Thus, there can only be one explanation. There was a third person here. It was that third person who killed both Mr. Faraday and Mr. Rowe, and set their bodies up to make it look like it was double murder. That third person is the real culprit.
Miles Edgeworth, there's just one thing you're missing.
Evidence, correct?
Exactly! Everything you've said up till now is nothing but a story played out in your head. However, this is where the real test begins. Can you prove that there was a third person involved in this crime?
Of course! The third person was truly there. That fact will resolve this glaring contradiction. The proof that this has all been set up, made to look like they killed each other. I'll present it, and lay bare the final piece of the puzzle that's not yet in place. What is this piece of evidence that proves there was a third person involved? I believe... Let's take a good look at the crime scene from another perspective. So immediately after the gunshot was heard, Thomas Stamming's instant death. I have a bullet wound in the chest, no burn marks. Probably still alive a little while after the shot, and this is what they look like. The bags randomly scattered about. My question is, why are the bags here? The gun in Mr. Faraday's hand and the plastic bag with his blood on it. These 2 items point to the presence of a third person.
How so?
Recall Detective Gumshoe's testimony. I was in the hallway the whole time. I didn't hear a single peep from the struggle. If there wasn't a struggle in this room, then there shouldn't be any plastic bags on the ground. Meaning that someone else must have deliberately scattered them around. Do you not see the possibility in this? Disregarding the gun for a moment, there's a high probability the blood splatter with a knife is used on a person. If the culprit held the knife in a plastic bag around it, they could use the bag to catch any blood splatter from when they withdrew the knife. Then, by spreading a few more plastic bags around, mixing the bloody one in with them, and arranging the room to make it look like there was a struggle between the 2, they would be able to conceal their presence.
No!
Looks like we still got a long way to go in this investigation. Yes.
Objection!
What the heck's up with you, pal?
Mr. Bad, I advise you place Detective Gumshoe under arrest.
What? What's the meaning of this?
Looks like you're not man enough to discipline your own subordinates.
Don't you dare.
That detective claims he was there standing in front of the door the entire time. But I have it on good authority that it was all a giant lie.
Miss Yu, I ask that you please explain that last statement.
I'll let His Honor explain himself.
I saw with my own eyes, I tell you. During the recess, there was a period of time where there was no one in the hallway. What?
See, Mr. Bad? So I ask you, why would a detective who was supposedly doing his job the whole time want to fabricate such a lie?
Gumshoe. Did you kill Mr. Faraday?
No! Of course not, sir! It would appear that the one who set this whole crime scene up is that detective. Which is basically renders his testimony a complete lie and wholly invalid. It looks like your perfect logic has just come tumbling down, Miles.
I was in the hallway the whole time. I didn't hear a single peep of a struggle.
Was that statement really a lie?
Detective Gumshoe, you're now a suspect in the murder of 2 men. Now spit out the truth or so help me. I haven't lied to anyone, sir! Honest! I really was there. I was in the hallway the whole time.
Hold it!
Detective Bad, I ask that you two please do not act without my permission.
After all, I'm the one that's heading up this investigation, am I not?
Don't talk like you know what's going on, boy.
All I want is for this investigation to run perfectly. Perfection is the only wish of a disciple of Von Karma, after all. Therefore, before you take Detective Gumshoe into custody, I'd like to set the record straight on something.
And what's that? What should I ask Detective Gumshoe about? What should I ask him about first? Actually, this is the only chance I get. He's going to say he's in the hallway the whole time. What was the stair of the hallway?
Detective Gumshoe, I take it there's no one else who's in the hallway at any time, correct?
Huh? Of course not, pal.
You're being awfully defensive. Might you be hiding something from me?
Watch your mouth, pal! I can't go around saying stuff like that about me without any evidence.
I suppose you're right. I have no evidence at this point. Edgeworth, how can you be losing a battle of wits with this detective? You're a disgrace!
Maybe I should ask about something else.
Why weren't you in the hallway? Then it comes to you, why were you missing in the hallway for the span of time?
Look, pal! Like I said, I was there the whole time, okay?
But there was testimony against you that... Miles Edgeworth! Why are you wasting our time with a completely useless question?
Huh?
The only logical reason as to why he was absent is that he was busy committing a crime. Anyone who says otherwise is a fool!
Let's ask him about a motive, I guess. I suppose the one thing I'd like to clarify is Detective Gumshoe's motive for committing this crime. Motive. Gumshoe, you got a grudge against Faraday or anything? No, sir, not me. Not a single bad thing against Faraday, sir. Is that a fact?
You really have a problem with lying, don't you, Detective Gumshoe?
I'm telling you, I am not lying.
The more unnatural you act, the more suspicious you become, you know. If you want a motive, Mr. Edgeworth, I have one right here for you.
Could you please share it with us? However, be forewarned that I won't hesitate to object with flights of fancy. Because all I'm interested in here is this perfect explanation.
You're serious, aren't you? Fine. You amuse me, so I'll humor you with a little courtroom practice.
Entertain me.
It was about a week ago. I saw the detective get chewed out by the livid Faraday in front of the precinct. He stood there super pale as Mr. Faraday yelled, "That's a salary cut for you, you nitwit." A brand new detective suddenly getting his salary cut. That's reason enough for a grudge. Well, how's that for the perfect explanation?
You totally misunderstand me, pal. No matter how mad I get, I could never hold a grudge. Quiet. We can't trust anything you say.
Sir?
There's nothing wrong with the motive she proposed, per se. But there are some gaps in her logic that need to be filled in. This used perfect explanation may not be so perfect at all. Let's get started tearing it down.
It was about a week ago?
A week ago? Then you and Detective Gumshoe are acquaintances?
No way. I only met him in person today.
Then how did you know about Detective Gumshoe?
Oh, I've seen him around before. I saw a detective get chewed out in a limited Faraday in front of the precinct.
Mr. Faraday was upset?
Yeah. You know what else? Mr. Faraday wasn't exactly known for getting angry often. But he was totally beat red in the face. And the offending detective just stood there, pale as a ghost, like he was about to die. Just like the face he's making right now, right?
I'm completely innocent, I tell ya. The poor man.
It was quite the scene with the detective. He stood there super pale as Mr. Faraday yelled, "That's a salary cut for you, you nitwit."
You just stood there watching this unfold in front of you?
Yeah, I have to say it was really enjoyable too. But that's why when I saw Mr. Detective Gumshoe earlier, I knew to steer clear of him.
No way. I thought that was because I had something stuck on my face.
What do you do?
Huh? What do I got stuck on my face?
Let's start with your eyes, nose, mouth. Tickles eyebrows.
Huh?
Oh man! Messing with your hands is too much fun!
Miss Yu, if you don't mind, I'd like to return your testimony now.
Sure, why not? A brand new detective suddenly getting a salary cut. That's a reason enough for a grudge.
To cut a new detective's salary right off the bat like that.
I'm not really familiar with the way you guys relate, but is that common practice?
Speaking of cutting my salary, didn't you threaten to do that to me earlier too?
I suppose I did. It's only natural to cut a worthless detective's salary down to their actual worth. My father could even fire anyone, new or old, with a snap of his fingers. Do you think that's the reason enough for detectives to hate you people?
Well, I guess I really shouldn't cut people's pay. Detective bad. Don't tell me Mr. Von Karma cut your salary earlier.
Well, how's that for a perfect explanation?
You call your explanation perfect?
Is that not how you like it?
Unfortunately for you, it's not up to my standards. Oh? Is there something you want me to clarify in that case? What should I do? Should I raise the objection? I would. Alright, if you could clear this one thing up for me. What's the motive for killing Mr. Rel? I understand Detective Gumshoe's potential motive for killing Mr. Faraday. However, what about his motive for killing Mr. Rel?
His motive for killing Mr. Rel? Like I would know.
If there is no clear motive for both of the murders, then I doubt this incident would have occurred. Would you agree? If there's anyone else who might have a grudge against either of the two men, or should we look into that ourselves?
Oh, in that case, I have absolutely no idea.
What? But that's impossible! She must know something!
Wait! Can you please not glare at me like that? This just makes me laugh.
I didn't even do anything and you're already laughing away.
Well, anyway, the way I see it, as long as he had a motive for killing one of the two, this crime would have played out the way it did anyway.
Oh. Why would you care to explain your logic? And this time, please try to provide a truly perfect explanation.
Perfect this, perfect that. Stop being so uptight. Or is that a prerequisite for being Von Karma?
Miles Edgeworth, I demand that you shut this rude woman up. I wish you'd both be quiet for just 1 second.
Oh well, I guess I'll have to explain it to you kids.
In detail, of course, right?
There's no one out there with a motive to kill both Mr. Faraday and Mr. Rel. All you really have to establish is that someone had a grudge against one of the two men. Mr. Rel, who happened to be there, became a witness to Mr. Faraday's murder. Therefore, he was killed out of necessity, to set up to look like they kill each other.
I wonder if that's really true. Is there no one out there who had a grudge against both men? I should take another hard look at the evidence for this morning's case. Just glance over that. Oh. Well, I guess there is one person. The second KG incident, as people are calling it, involves the embassy staff member. Two men who both went up as suspects in the case. Is there someone else I'm overlooking? Who's somehow related to them? There is. I'll save that.
There's no one else out there with a motive to kill both Mr. Faraday and Mr. Rel.
So there is no one else who might have a grudge against both Mr. Faraday and Mr. Rel?
I suppose no one is a bit of a stretch, but I'm pretty sure no one like that was here in court today.
She's lying through her teeth. We just saw someone like that here earlier.
Besides, you don't need to prove that the killer had a grudge against both men. All you have to do is establish someone had a grudge against one of the two men.
Someone with a grudge against one of the men. In that case, aren't there plenty of other people who fit the bill?
Sure. After all, who doesn't garner scorn for another simply by being alive? But the only one who held a grudge and acted upon it was by killing with Detective Gumshoe. Furthermore, Mr. Rel, who happened to be there, became a witness to Mr. Faraday's murder.
So you're saying that he was basically silenced?
Aren't you glad you managed to avoid the same fate, Your Honor? Why, if you had been the one who witnessed the blood-covered detective...
What? Detective Gumshoe, you'd kill even me? Nah! I could never do something as terrible as that, Your Honor. There's no need for even a second deliberation. I will hand down my verdict here. Objection! Your Honor, take a look around. We're not in a court right now. It would be greatly appreciated if you would stay here with us in reality. Please forgive me. I know not what I do.
And you there, Miss Yu, hurry up and continue with your testimony. If you fail to do so, I'll whip you into shape. That's nice. Kind of sounds like fun, actually. Anyway, Detective Gumshoe had to erase the witness, Mr. Rel. Therefore, he was killed out of necessity, and set up to look like they'd kill each other.
I didn't do it, pal.
No hard feelings, but I don't think we can take the word of a criminal seriously.
But I can't even begin to think of ways to set up a crime scene.
I suppose you do lack the necessary tactical mind required to do such a thing.
Oh, why do you have to kick a man when he's down, pal?
You shouldn't put yourself down, Detective. You're a big boy. You thought it all up for yourself, right?
Yeah, that's right. I worked real hard at it, too. I think this proves one thing about the detective. He has the mental acuity of a worm. I have to admit, her explanation makes sense. However, there's also something that she overlooked in her testimony. I should present that piece of evidence to see if I can make her see the truth. Is no one out there with a motive to kill both men? I disagree. After all, it says so here! Miss Yu, I believe there is someone you overlooked in making your statement. Or rather, is it because you'd rather not bring this person up? What do you mean? We're looking for someone with a reason to kill both Mr. Faraday and Mr. Rel. But I can't think of at least one person who fits the bill. He was a suspect in the original KG incident, and a member of the Kodafian embassy staff, Mr. Manny Cochin. That's right, the very man who came to visit you earlier in the hallway. The man who killed a member of the Kodafian embassy staff, Mr. Rel, and the man who was the lead prosecutor of the KG incident, Mr. Faraday, are you telling me that Mr. Koshin has no reason at all to kill both of these men?
Well, I suppose he might have a reason or two.
You cover for me, pal! Maybe you're not such a bad guy after all. Don't get ahead of yourself. You're still a suspect, make no mistake about that. The perfect evidence, the perfect testimony, these are the only things I wish to hold. But I didn't do it!
You will stay under my authority and go investigate Miss Manny Koshin for me.
And remember, I will not be very forgiving should any of this leak. You want to investigate Koshin? You just be wasting your time.
And why is that?
Koshin was up in the viewing gallery watching the trial. Trump's told. Every cop in this place has been keeping an eye on the guy since we arrived.
Then the only real suspect we still have is Detective Gumshoe.
I suppose so. No, come on, Detective Bad, you gotta believe me, sir. I really was in the hallway the entire time, sir. I never took a single step from this room, sir. Okay, then are you saying there's someone else who passed through the hallway? No, there was no one else, sir. Why should I believe you didn't do it?
He's one incredibly foolish detective. Standing right in front of a crime scene all by himself. It's as good as a confession of guilt.
I have to admit, it's a bit strange. Most criminals would fabricate some sort of lie to escape their crimes. And if that detective really wanted to prove that he is innocent, you'd think he would at least offer up and have spaced out while on duty or the like. Come on, Gumshoe. Time for your interrogation. Detective Bad. Off they go.
Miles Edgeworth, I'll go on ahead and report this to Papa.
And that, as they say, is that. Right, everyone?
Well, I suppose we should be getting back to our real jobs now, huh?
Before we do, Miss Yu, there is something I'd like to speak with you about.
What is it?
Well...
So, what did you want to ask me about?
The current case of the murdered Qaddafian embassy staff member. I've heard that people have begun calling it the second KG-8 incident.
Only among you law enforcement types. And, what about it?
I'd like for you to tell me everything you know about the original KG-8 incident.
I'm afraid I can't help you. I don't know anything beyond what was reported in the papers.
No, I believe you know much more, since you are directly tied to the KG incident.
I'd appreciate it if you'd stop with the false accusations. Baseless outbursts are useless both inside and outside the courtroom, you know.
I do, but I also know that I do have a leg to stand on here.
You think you can stop making all too serious face in front of me?
If you could please stop laughing for just 1 second. I'm not going to make any headway like this. I'm just going to have to show her exactly how related to the KG incident she is. This'll stop the laughs. Miss Yu, I believe that I have proof of your connection to the KG incident.
The file of is your proof? Very well then. Why don't you tell me exactly how I'm related to the KG incident?
The victim! You're connected to the KG-8 incident is through the victim. The victim's name is CCU. You will note that she has the same last name as you. Can you really still tell me with a straight face that you're not related to this case?
Sorry, but we're not related.
What?
Just kidding. You asked that question with such a serious look on your face.
I couldn't help it. Miss Yu, I asked that you please tell me the truth.
Alright, I'll tell you everything I know.
Finally.
As you guessed, the one who reported the smuggling activities was the Amano group. was my sister, CCU. As I thought. And she was killed right before she was to testify in impending trial by Manny Cochin. But because he was tried once and was acquitted, he gets to live out the rest of his cushy life, completely carefree. All because of a lack of evidence. No, I heard the evidence to convict him does exist. What? I heard it all from Mr. Faraday himself about after Mr. Cochin's trial was over. Apparently, a man in black made off with the most important piece of evidence. Then the evidence tampered with? Isn't it just like a criminal to do something like that? The smuggling ring been run out of the Amana group by one of the secretaries. They bailed Mr. Cochin out. Turns out they were in a league with each other all along. How big was that smuggling ring? Was it a large operation? I don't really know. Which is why I wanted to become the lead defense on this case that people are calling the second KG-8 incident. But I haven't learned anything new at all. I was probably expecting too much, I know. You mean, you think this case has nothing to do with the smuggling ring? I don't know what to think. What about Manny Cochin? Why did Mr. Cochin want to meet you earlier? Actually, he came to watch the trial. Apparently, he only found out that I was the defense lawyer on this case after he arrived. He figured he should say hi, and one other thing. Looks like you couldn't resolve anything this time either. Too bad. What's that supposed to mean? Oh boy, stop with this scary face already. Fine, really. I gave him a good slap across the face. The way she talks about slapping him as she laughs away is kind of creepy. But it's just as Mr. Bat said. He's not related to the double murder. I asked around and found people in the gallery claiming he was in his seat the entire time. Talk about cruel fate. Well, this is about all I know. Sorry. Guess I wasn't much help, huh? That's not true. I'm sorry I made you recall such a painful time in your life. Edgeworth, you really are too serious for your own good. You really need to learn to relax. We wouldn't want you to die of stress, would we? Thank you for the advice. But there's no need to worry. I work in my own way, and I will catch this criminal in my own way as well. You'll see. Look at you with your game face on, ready to go. I'm making no such face. Did you know laughter is the best medicine, Mr. Edgeworth? Don't you get tired of making such a serious face all the time? I'm charged with making sure that all criminals of the world are found guilty. I have no need for laughter. There you go, making that face again. Oh well. I gotta get going. I still have a few loose ends I need to tie up. The KG-8 incident in this murder investigation. It is my belief that these two cases are related to each other somehow. Plus, the detective. Detective Gumshoe. It's obvious he's lying, even though his lie is hurting his chances. Clearly, this case is far from over. But whether or not that detective is the murderer can only be determined once I've completed my perfect investigation. Mr. Von Karma. I swear to uphold your honorable name. My name isn't Miles Edgeworth. Goodness, that was a doozy. This case is picking up speed. This is 4D. This is Miles Edgeworth Investigations. See you next time.